Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nithi Razdan. Tonight, the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 34 years, and now the UAE becomes a strategic partner, backing India's position on terrorism from Pakistan in the joint statement. Has this visit then seen a real breakthrough in the relationship? Also, as tensions rise between India and Pakistan, should India go ahead with the NSA level talks this week or call them off? That coming just as reports come in of a fresh ceasefire violation in the Poonch sector. But first tonight, we'd like to begin the program with an update on the blast in Bangkok, where we now know that at least 15 people have been killed in a blast outside a temple in the Thai capital. It was a powerful bomb that exploded outside a Hindu shrine. The bomb exploded at about 5:30 p.m. Indian time outside the Erawan shrine in the downtown Chidlom district, according to the police. Many Buddhists frequent this shrine as well. The temple is located on a main road through Bangkok's commercial hub and is surrounded by 3 major shopping malls. Understandably, a huge amount of chaos once those explosions went off. It's not clear. Also reports, unconfirmed reports coming in perhaps of other bombs also being detonated by security forces there. There were very clear pictures of burnt motorbikes on the main road that were also seen, also of injured people quickly being taken away. So that is still a developing story where we will try to bring you the very latest. I spoke to the Indian ambassador to Bangkok a little while earlier, and he said there had been no reports yet of any Indian casualties or injuries in this blast. The Ministry of External Affairs has also tweeted a number of helpline numbers. We'll just bring those up for you where people can call and anyone who's there, any Indians who are there can call. If we can just bring up those numbers from the MEA. There are a number of helpline numbers that have been established, and there are officials there, the Second Secretary S.C. Sinha and Manas Mustafi, another diplomat who's there, who will be dealing with any queries that people have. We'll have more on that story a little later once we get more information. Well, the big story as we speak is Prime Minister Modi's visit to the UAE, the first by an Indian Prime Minister in 34 years. And a very, very significant joint statement has been issued by both countries just a little while earlier, in which, among other things, the partnership has been elevated to a strategic partnership, and also a tough message has been sent out to Pakistan, with both countries calling on all nations to fully respect and implement their commitments to resolving disputes bilaterally and peacefully without resorting to violence and terrorism. Also calling on states to reject and abandon the use of terrorism against other countries, dismantle terror infrastructures and bring perpetrators of terrorism to justice. This is a very, very important shift in the UAE's position, given their rather ambivalent stand perhaps in the past on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and cross-border terrorism. So a very clear statement therefore, and support there coming from the UAE on India's position on cross-border terrorism. Also very importantly, both countries will now be fighting terror together. There is going to be counter-terrorism cooperation, intelligence sharing. There will be a dialogue between the national security advisors of both countries. They will meet, the NSAs will meet every 6 months. Defense cooperation, defense exercises, that mechanism has also been established. And also the UAE aiming to invest up to $75 billion to support investment in India's next generation infrastructure. So all of these extremely significant developments today. In about an hour and a half from now, the Prime Minister will actually be making a speech to the Indian community in Dubai. There are more than 50,000 people that are expected to turn up there in Dubai to listen to the Prime Minister speak. My colleague Ketki Angre is covering that visit and sent us this report.
They're certainly trying to beat the heat, but that doesn't seem to have deterred the enthusiasm at the Dubai Cricket Stadium. I'm not even quite sure if my voice can be heard over the din, but let's try and get you some views from here. आप कहाँ से आए हैं? कहाँ से आए हैं?
केरला से आते हैं, केरला का।
अच्छा, और यहाँ पे इतनी ज्यादा गर्मी है, इतनी धूप है, बावजूद उसके आप इतने ज्यादा पहले आए हैं।
15 साल से काम कर रहे हैं हम लोग, 15 साल से।
अच्छा।
बहुत गर्मी
और इतनी गर्मी है यहाँ पर, फिर भी आप यहाँ पर आए हैं।
अपने लीडर को मिलने के लिए आ रहे हैं। कभी 35 साल हो गए, अभी इंडिया पे एक मिनिस्टर भी यहाँ पे नहीं आया, इसके लिए उनको मिलने के लिए हमारे लीडर को।
आप क्या कहें?
हम बहुत खुशी है, हम इंडिया से इधर आ गया। मोदी जी हमारा बहुत प्यार आदमी है, बहुत प्रधानमंत्री, अच्छा प्रधानमंत्री।
हम ओमान से आए हैं, ओमान मस्कत से। मोदी से मिलने के लिए, उनको सुनने के लिए और देश के प्रति जो उनकी सेवा है उसके लिए हम उनके बहुत ही आकर्षित हैं।
मोदी जी के बहुत आभारी, हमारे देश को संभालने के लिए उनको करोड़ों धन्यवाद। ऐसे प्राइम मिनिस्टर हमें मिले हैं जिंदगी में, हमेशा याद रखेंगे और हमेशा वही जीते। हमारी कामनाएं, शुभकामनाएं उनके साथ हमेशा रहे।
In fact, it's still a while before the Prime Minister will even come to the stadium and address people. But even before that, people already, their spirits are pretty high. And even the muggy weather, the high levels of humidity and heat have not managed to deter their enthusiasm. In Dubai, with camera person S. Dhanpal, Ketkiamre for NDTV. Well, certainly always very colourful whenever the Prime Minister does address the Indian community in whichever country he's in. Well, joining us here in the studio, former diplomat G. Parthasarathy, someone who's dealt with Gulf countries closely when he was in the Ministry of External Affairs. We also have with us Nalin Kohli of the BJP, Abhishek Singhvi of the Congress will be joining us, and Mr. KC Singh, who has also served in the UAE in his capacity as a diplomat, joins us tonight as well. Let me ask the two diplomats, then Mr. Parthasarathy, to you first. Let's look at this joint statement. Pretty tough words, particularly on Pakistan, without naming Pakistan. A message clearly, about the UAE's shifting its position, and also perhaps a message by India on the eve of the NSA talks.
You know, I look at this region holistically. And the Arab Gulf states, we have about 7.5 million people. We have remittances amounting to around $45 to $50 billion. And the UAE particularly is our second largest export market after the United States, with huge potential for investment if we get our act together. I think the most important thing, Nidhi, which has emerged here, and we should understand the geopolitical context. You are getting, after the Iranian nuclear deal, a lineup of the Gulf Arab states very nervous not only about Iran, but also about ISIS, with even Israel on the one hand, and Iran trying to find its way around on the other. For us, I think, let's start. Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit to Saudi Arabia created a good ambience in the Gulf. I think that when you talk about Pakistan, their real downslide started when they appear to have promised Saudi Arabia defense assistance and backed off from Yemen. The first person to launch a scathing criticism of Pakistan when that happened was the UAE foreign minister, or the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, which was astonishing. UAE never does that.
Which is why this joint statement is so important.
So this is very clearly, I mean, that's Pakistan. But if you see the communique, we are talking of a security partnership extending from South Asia, the Gulf, to West Asia. After all, the Gulf lies on our routes to West Asia. So I think it is extremely important, with the changing American position, the new alignments, that countries where we have so many people with such potential for investment turn to us. And I think we should build on it. We've had this, as I said, starting off with Saudi Arabia, which has handed over terrorists to us. I doubt very much if after this Dawood will set foot in the United Arab Emirates.
Well, very interesting what you say. Ambassador KC Singh, would you agree with Ambassador Parthasarathy's assessment of that? Would you say that this joint statement marks a shift, a big shift politically, certainly, in the relationship between the two countries?
I would call it an evolution. It is not a shift, and we must look back to what was happening. I was there at a very crucial moment from 1999 to 2003, 2 years before 9/11 and 2 years after 9/11. So I think with 9/11 the shift had already begun, but UAE had backed themselves into a corner as a country which had relations with the Taliban. They were not terribly happy with that, but they, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, were in that corner. But 9/11 sort of exploded because one of the persons flying in the planes which were crashed in America happened to be an Emirati. He happened to be from Ras Al Khaimah. So that was a wake-up call for UAE, and I could see a distinct difference in how they dealt with the counter-terror cooperation, because after 9/11, December attack on Indian Parliament, for the first time I got listing from them of the SIM card which he had managed to get, an Emirati SIM card, which the terrorists carried in their cars, but we were able to get that back after they were knocked out. They gave us the printout. So the change had begun then. But then I think what was happening was that even India was, your own position has to evolve. It has to evolve both ways. And the larger geopolitical thing, I think for us, if their relations with Pakistan were a concern, their main concern has been India's relations with Iran. And because I went to Iran after being ambassador to UAE, I'm very aware of that. So this is one of the factors, because like between India and Pakistan, we have a territorial dispute. UAE has a territorial dispute over 3 islands which they claim were forcibly seized by Iran as they were becoming independent in 1971. So there is a shift which has been underway since then. But this particular joint statement means that we have taken the bull by the horns, and Prime Minister going there and engaging the person who really is the last word on national security issues, which is the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, I think, was the only way to deal with it. And this is certainly a quantum jump, but it would depend on how you play the other cards. It would depend on how you play the Iran card. It will depend on how you further proceed with this. Otherwise, it will be just a statement of good intent.
But before I get the 2 spokespersons in, would you agree with Mr. Parthasarathy when he says that he thinks it would be tough for Dawood Ibrahim to set foot in the UAE again? Or is that, would you be cautious on that? Mr. Singh, that was for you.
You see, what had happened was that even while I was there post 2001, they had assured me that Dawood had been warned that were he to transit through UAE after 2001 to 2003, they will grab him and send him back. And Dawood's brother actually was deported. And therefore, Dawood changed his modus operandi about then. He may have gone through, may not have gone through, but I was assured that if you get any inkling and let us know, and they said they had warned him that was he to be caught in UAE, he'll be handed over to India. So that's why I'm saying the change had begun then. But then it also has to lead to more proactive cooperation, intelligence sharing. There, I think over the last 7, 8, 9 years, we sort of lagged.
Well, I think then you, Ambassador Parthasarathy, you're saying that actually Dawood still managed to sort of get away with it.
I think Casey would know better, but the Dawood's sort of daughter getting married to Javed, that son, took place there later on. Yeah.
All right.
But
let me
but he never showed up in the hotel.
Well, he was known to have been there.
Well, Abhishek Singhvi, the Congress today was extremely upset though with what the Prime Minister said earlier when he was talking to investors in the UAE about inheriting a government with flaws, troubles, lethargy, indecision and so on. But quite apart from the politics for just a moment, would you at least concede that there is a strategic movement forward, an important forward movement in this India-UAE relationship, which is important for India?
I've heard patiently what has been said, Nidhi. First, I think we do disservice to the excellent structure we have of foreign policy to assume that there are shifts, as you put it. There is a far greater continuity in foreign policy than people imagine, irrespective of political vicissitudes, and that's the way it should be. And I think this is building upon building upon building. There is a fundamental continuity and consistency, and I think that's good for the country. Political color and governmental color changes has a more direct and a more immediate impact on all areas except foreign policy, where it should be minimal. There have been great initiatives in the past with the Middle East, generally with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with the UAE, and I think this is carrying it forward, and I would to that extent always support something which carries it forward. Second, where we are critical is on this rather bad habit which has started for the last year in particular, that on foreign soil, something which was conventionally never done, you start criticizing governments of your country, and that's the principle. Here you have me supporting a evolutionary movement ahead, and there you have the BJP government, not only the Prime Minister earlier many times last year, but other ministers on other foreign trips are extremely critical of India, something which we could have easily done, but we don't believe in it. Nehruvian policy never believed in it. Subsequent Prime Ministers don't believe in it. It paints you in a poor picture. People laugh at you. Take your domestic squabbles and fight it out in the Bihar election romp. Don't think every foreign policy meeting is a election stump meeting. That's our fundamental objection. I think more than us, it paints you in a poor light. It paints the Prime Ministerial office. It paints the continuity and the institutionalized continuity of foreign policy in a poor light. Thirdly, I think the most important part in this part of the world especially has been for some time, and more so now, is the economic engagement. And it is actually the economic engagement which is making the estrangement from imploding republics like Pakistan, the estrangement is increasing from these countries, because these are countries very conscious of a stable economic environment. They would hate to have the splinter groups of Pakistan exploding bombs in their territory, and therefore, despite Pakistan's crude attempts at religious identity, which they've done in many times in the past, a lot of the countries in this region are moving away, rightly moving away, and realizing that playing the religious card actually is going to create a huge problem for them. They live and they survive on this.
Before I move on to Nalin, I just want to though ask you, you said it's an evolutionary policy, but the fact also is that did we do enough? Did India do enough under the UPA to reach out to, for instance, countries like the UAE, where you have such a huge Indian community as well?
Absolutely.
Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was meant to go there at least on 2 occasions, and those visits never materialized. So, in a sense, did the UPA government ignore this part of the world, and something that Narendra Modi has now
I'll tell you why not.
Put on center stage?
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why not. You've already heard from somebody else about Saudi Arabian initiative. The real problem is that Mr. Modi has replaced his own foreign minister, and he has led the country to believe that foreign policy works only when prime ministers visit. Now, while it is true that some visits had to be cancelled by Dr. Manmohan Singh because of logistical problems or other issues, there were several visits by the foreign minister. I remember UAE visits by Salman Khurshid when he was foreign minister. Now, the problem is that the optics, the drama, the great ostentation, the big speeches, the optics are more dramatic. Mr. Modi is a far greater communicator, but a lot of that communication is just a certain amount of optics. The Prime Minister during our time may not have visited, but there were solid links. Senior bureaucrats, Foreign Minister, a lot of the trade ministers. That is ignored. Because as I said, Mr. Modi has believed in replacing his own foreign minister.
No, but there is a big difference between when the Prime Minister goes to a country, and certainly we didn't see a joint statement like this back then, this kind of cooperation that the two countries are talking about, even if Salman Khurshid did go. Nalin Kohli, let me get you in on this question, A, of the significance of this joint statement, and B, of the Congress's criticism that politics is being played abroad. When the Prime Minister travels abroad, politics should be kept aside. Leave that for the election rallies, not for when you're representing India.
Well, there are two parts to this debate. The good news for the country, and the second part is the bad news for the Congress. So either way, I don't know how to take this debate further, but let's do it. I think Ambassador K.C. Singh and Ambassador Parthasarathy have given a wide description of what this entire visit does. The joint statement itself says a lot. It says a lot, it says it frankly, it says it very unequivocally. And I think that's for India to celebrate. That the visit was poised to at a different level was clear from the very fact that from the start, when the Prime Minister landed there, he was received, and that was very gracious of the Crown Prince there to receive him at the airport. Everything there had suggested that yes, this would be a visit that would be more than ordinary, right up to the event that will take place today, and you've shown it on your TV. These are not traditional voters of the BJP in that sense. These are Indian citizens who are celebrating the presence of the Prime Minister, which will be seen in an hour from now. Because Kerala is not exactly the state where the BJP has ever opened its account in terms of assembly or parliament. Now let's get down to the political part of it, because I think the strategic part has been well covered, and they are eminently, they can eminently do it better than me. The political part is, let's go one by one. Dr. Singhvi says it's evolutionary. If it's evolutionary, then perhaps this visit shouldn't have taken place. In 34 years, that evolution couldn't bring about a prime ministerial visit. Second, Dr. Singhvi then runs down the foreign minister. When 1 year of Prime Minister Modi's government was completed, at that time we had put it out that 102 countries were visited between the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. Of course, the vast majority by the Foreign Minister also, excluding double counting where the two of them may have visited the same country. So it's not that the Foreign Ministry has not been active. It's been active also in troubled zones, which we touched upon in terms of the Yemen issue, which came up just recently in the discussion. The problem with the Congress party is the Congress party finds itself in a predicament. In terms of evolution, they didn't do enough. And second is, when they criticize the Prime Minister for speaking the obvious, these are people, let's take the $75 billion fund. These are potential investors, as anywhere else in the world, who have been crying about why they couldn't invest in the Indian economy or the India story for successive years at an end. Something was wrong, therefore they were not investing. Now, either there's nobody's running down the Congress party individually or the former Prime Minister individually. It's an acknowledgement, things were lethargic, things were not so. We are moving on and we are inviting you to come and invest in India. It's neither an investment into the BJP.
Is that the appropriate place to do it? Because he's the Prime Minister of India who represents India, who represents all of us. Is that the appropriate place? Because then it does become about
when you
politics.
talk to investors, and investors are not looking at investors at the end of the day, irrespective whether they are Indian investors going abroad, Indian investors in India, foreign investors coming to India, they are going to speak on the currency of investment, which is going to talk about whether governance is sharper, whether governance is fast moving, whether governance decisions are taking place, whether there's follow-up, whether there's a policy that's encouraging investment. Basically, it's going to come down to that. It's not going to come down to whether the BJP and the Congress party are going to speak a language that is polite to each other. This is not rude to each other. It's not picking up and saying. And second is, when the Prime Minister addresses, for example, an Indian constituency, which are non-resident Indians, Indians of persons of Indian origin, that's a different audience. The Congress party, unfortunately, doesn't make a difference between the two types of audiences. The audiences that are there for investment and the audiences that are Indians who are going there not by force. They are going there to listen to the Prime Minister for the fact that he's a charismatic leader. So let's not mix it all together.
First, Ambassador K.C. Singh, ultimately when political statements are then made on foreign soil, we now know there is no consensus on foreign policy in India as there used to be once upon a time. That's a dream that's long over. So therefore, do you believe that it's politics or plain speak?
No, we shouldn't do it. I think it's not correct to carry your differences abroad, and that's a universally accepted principle amongst democracies, and particularly in a Gulf country, because you have very clear divisions there of politics, because a large population is from Kerala, and many of the social centers, communities like Kerala Social Center in Abu Dhabi is aligned to the Marxists. Another one is aligned to the Congress. So there's very clear orientation, although what the Emiratis do is they don't let you indulge in open political meetings, but the orientation of certain groups is very clear. So if you take your politics there, you're dividing the community. That is not a good thing. And your local hosts, they've had friendships with earlier regimes. Mrs. Gandhi was really respected there, etc. So you get no advantage in running down your previous government, and the local host is not necessarily impressed by that. However, coming to their investment in India, it's not that this has not been attempted before. Sheikh Mohammed and his two brothers, he had promised me before I moved to Iran that he'll come to India. And he did come in the middle of 2003 before I left, including with two brothers. Unfortunately, we were not able to use it. Mr. Yashwant Sinha was the foreign minister. He kind of took it in his stride. We didn't really capitalize on it to sit down with them, because the areas they're interested in would be like MR is interested in construction, or they'll be interested in oil and gas, which we were not disinvesting. So they are otherwise passive investors. They may have $800 billion, but they are not into every kind of manufacturing. They are interested in certain niche areas. Now, I don't know what assurances Prime Minister has given them, how we will draw them into these areas, or into solar power, or into new areas. I'm sure the new areas to look at.
They've talked about $75 billion in infrastructure investment. So that is a pretty significant number in terms of at least a promise.
Fine, but this has been debated before. You need a special UAE doesn't have the ability to say put up highways. They don't want to collect tolls. How do you bring that investment in? Even the previous government, I know, was talking they get fixed return, or they'll be looking for sovereign guarantees. You know the problem we had with Etisalat, their telecommunication company, which lost money in the 2G scam. And till now, I'm sure this must have been taken up by them with the Prime Minister. How we are going to, because for them it is their sovereign investment. Now, you can't tell them that you are playing the market, you've lost money. So it's more complicated than it appears, but there are possibilities.
Okay,
there are possibilities, and we'll have to have new ways of dealing with them.
Ambassador Parthasarathi, so what has changed?
Two things, let me say, on two issues. One, I agree with KC. Ultimately, whether it's UAE, given the political relationship now evolving, and these monarchies function according to what the ruler wants, if we set up the right environment, that investment will come. There'll be no political inhibitions about worrying about Pakistan or China and everywhere else. The money will come, but that depends on us. And he is right. XLR deal and that 2G scam ruined our image in the UAE. Casey is right. The other thing is about the domestic issues and foreign policy. You know, I think Casey and I belong to a different generation. We belong to a generation where Mr. Narasimha Rao sent Mr. Vajpayee on a very important mission to the UN Human Rights Commission when for the first time Pakistan was trying to get Kashmir brought to the UN. Mr. Vajpayee led it. Salman Khurshid as Minister of State was just a member of that delegation. So I think we need to look back. I hope all political parties do this, on that era and what the first generation of the leadership in India bequeathed to them, and and use it and utilize it and go by it.
I think those are very wise words actually to end on, and I don't know if the BJP and the Congress are listening to that, because the political discourse just seems to be so bitter that there isn't even an acknowledgement of appreciation on either side. Abhishek Singhvi, last comment from you on that particular point, because it's hard today to even get the Congress, for instance, to acknowledge that yes, Narendra Modi had a good trip to the UAE and this is a breakthrough visit.
On the contrary, Nidhi, 3 quick points in ending. First, here I was openly in your program endorsing and welcoming the initiatives taking further the continuity in foreign policy as a very important investment destination to India from outside. I said so very clearly. Second, there is a consensus of 3 out of 4. I started that point and I am very glad to hear complete endorsement that when you speak ill about your domestic squabbles abroad, you actually defame and harm yourself much more than anybody else. People laugh at you. I made that point and I believe there is broad agreement minus the BJP. Third, I think on the specifics there is one error, and that's what I want to end on. Look at the figures of investment from this region from 1998 to 2004. Look at the figures of investment from 2004 to 2010. Look at growth rates or totals or absolutes. In no way is the point the BJP is making validated, except of course that Mr. Modi is very good at hyping it. It is not validated that investments were abysmally low during our time, did not grow from this region, and that they were historic highs during the 98 to 2003. I have always said that there is always scope for galloping increase each time each government comes. You can and should increase. That is a different issue. But to suggest that we were abysmal in actual statistical terms, the figures show otherwise. Any figure check annual growth or the over 10-year period compared to the 6-year period will show that.
No, so Nalin, I'll give you the last word on this, and I would like to ask you whether the BJP would heed the advice of 2 experienced diplomats, and particularly what Ambassador Parthasarathy said when he gave the example of Narasimha Rao sending Mr. Vajpayee to the UN Human Rights Commission. Can that ever be repeated in this country?
No, a lot could be repeated. It takes 2 to tango. It can't be a one-way street, and we can now, this debate will get digressed. So let's not move down there. There have been periods of cooperation also, there's no doubt. There have also been periods of breakdown. And I think domestically also nothing remains today a secret. After all, the world is connected by the instant. So what happens here travels internationally. When you run down the Prime Minister in Parliament, outside Parliament, it's all there. So I mean, nothing is now hidden. We live in an open world. My second comment was in terms of, maybe on a slightly light mood. The Congress party at one point had given this country the Hindu rate of growth. We know what that was in the 50s and the 60s. I somehow get this feeling throughout the UPA we had a hidden rate of growth. Somehow nobody, whether it's investors, whether it's ordinary people, middle class, whether it's the rich, whether it's anybody, felt this country was galloping. But somehow the Congress has always felt there. Perhaps a good starting point would be that, yes, maybe things were not good, they are improving, and we welcome the improvement in the national interest. We'll talk our politics and find out the middle point on that too.
Nidhi,
all right. Well, I have to leave it at that as far as...
One sentence. For 8 of those 10 years, our lowest growth rate was higher than their highest in 6 years.
And I will continue to debate that separately with the 2 of you again and again. And I have to leave it at that on the UAE. I'd like to thank Ambassador Casey Singh, who has to go for another program. But we'd like to move on, though, to Pakistan, where there is another ceasefire violation that is taking place again this evening in the Balakot sector. Pakistan also lodging another protest with India today, accusing India of ceasefire violations. Now, these violations have only increased since the two prime ministers met in Ufa in Russia in July and agreed to have NSA-level talks, which are supposed to take place this Sunday in Delhi. For people living along the line of control in Poonch in particular, there is only deep fear. There were 6 civilians that were killed over the weekend, and many just cannot go back home.
A distraught Mohammad Sharif showing us the damage caused to his house by the Pakistani shelling here at the LOC in Poonch. For the last 4 days, his home has come under intense fire. He was lucky to survive after a splinter hit him and injured his right arm. The 25-year-old is homeless as live shells are still inside his home and outside in his maize fields.
हमें किसी ने आज तक अभी पूछा नहीं मेरे को कि तुझे क्या प्रॉब्लम है, कुछ क्या नहीं है, तू जिंदा है मुर्दा है, क्यों मैं बच्चों को बहुत मुश्किल से उस दिन मैंने बचा लिए, तो बचाते हुए मेरे को थोड़ी सी छीनी लग गई.
With things quiet on the LOC today, villagers here in Sauzia try to visit their homes to see the magnitude of damage. People say it's deceptive calm and they don't know when shells will land again. Several hamlets of Sauzia have literally become unsafe because dozens of live shells are scattered in the fields and abandoned homes. 75-year-old Noor Mohammed blames government for not doing enough to protect their lives and property.
इसीलिए तो हम सोचते हैं क्या ये भी हमारा हिंदुस्तान है, यहाँ पर भी हम लोग हिंदुस्तान के नागरिक हैं, यहाँ पर क्यों नहीं बंदोबस्त क्यों नहीं हो रहा.
Unlike in other border areas, the government has failed to build underground bunkers in all the forward areas of Poonch where people can take shelter.
तो हम एडमिशन से यही कहते हैं कि हमें रहने की जगह चाहिए जहां पर हमारे बच्चे और हम रह सकते हैं और इस फायर से बच सकेंगे.
It is the constant fear and uncertainty the people of this area are living in. While there was no major ceasefire violation today, people here say it is a deceptive calm. They are asking the question why the government is not able to protect their lives and property in this border area. In Poonch with cameraman Sheikh Tariq, Nazir Masoodi for NDTV.
Well, we have the Vice Air Chief Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry, Strategic Affairs Expert, joining us tonight from Islamabad. Nalin Kohli and Mr. Parthasarathy here still with us. Smita Prakash, the editor, the Chief Editor of ANI, also joining us this evening. Let me just get straight to this, Mr. Parthasarathy. Do you believe these talks are going to yield anything? What is the point of talking? We just seem to be shelling each other every day. There are protests being lodged every day. Is this going to go anywhere?
Look, let's be clear, Nidhi. And if you listen me out, why it should be on. I think if you see latest developments in Pakistan, they're astounding. Ministers of the Nawaz Sharif government and a politician like Javed Hashmi have accused two successive Directors General of the ISI, Shuja Pasha and Zahirul Islam, of messing around with internal politics and siding with the Tehreek-e-Insaf. And it has led to the resignation of the minister. I think the tensions, the differences between these are going to become more salient. It sort of brings back to my mind when I was in Islamabad, the row over Kargil. Now, the fact is, you have reached an agreement with the Prime Minister of Pakistan. You know there are these differences. I mean, anyone, of course, any person from Pakistan wishing to say they don't exist, will be laughed at anywhere in the world. So, you have reached an agreement, and I believe that is important because it is the first agreement which we have signed which is so terrorism centric. It involves 3 layers. Firstly, the NSAs, secondly, the paramilitary border forces, and thirdly, the DGMOs. Do I expect any breakthrough? The answer is no.
But because it's terror centric, you feel it should go
No,
ahead.
it should continue. And most importantly, we don't have a direct channel of communications with the Pakistani military. The DGMOs talk to each other on the phone. I don't think that's adequate. The DGMOs should be institutionalized meetings regularly so that the military to military contacts are there. Having said that, I do believe, I've seen this sort of firing. This looks like chicken feed compared to what existed between 2001 and 2003.
No, of course.
No, but the fact is, the difference is, this has moved from the valley to Jammu.
Yeah.
And that's where the infiltration comes now. It's not in the valley, and therefore this takes place.
No, so I just want to get Smita Prakash, and because Smita, you've actually argued that raising doubts about whether there is any point to having this discussion on Sunday.
See, Nidhi, what I feel is that you have to see the protagonists involved. You know, when you talk about NSA level talks, here we have an Indian NSA who totally is not of the diplomatic mold. He believes in what the reports he gets, intelligence reports on the ground, preferably if he can collect it himself. And he believes in that, and he will go with that. Now it comes to the Pakistani side, and there you have a seasoned diplomat, you know, who will play a round of golf and have a single malt in the evening, and then discuss how we go forward with Pakistan.
With India. Is 86 years old, for God's sake.
So he is 86, and he is from that vintage. Remember, he's a peacenik who, from the time, he even objected to Operation Gibraltar, right? He objected at that time to Bhutto saying that get inside Jammu and Kashmir and this is what we've got to do out there. But he said economically it will lead to ruin of Pakistan, and it did. And they felt that Akhnur will not result in international border. India will not do anything on the international border. But Sartaj Aziz was right, Bhutto was wrong. They lost 65, Yahya Khan came in and then they lost another half of the country. Sartaj Aziz also was a peacenik when it came to Chagai 1 and Chagai 2 after Pokhran. So here's a man who believes in peace. But look at Pakistan. Where does the National Security Advisor to Nawaz Sharif fit in the security scenario? Nowhere. Because when it comes to security, internal and external, when it comes to dealing with India, it is the army which calls the shots. Sartaj Aziz really has no role to play. So I don't see whether he's coming out here with anything other than what the army tells him to say. So it's going to be one of those tu-tu-meh-meh affairs where India throws a dossier and Pakistan throws a dossier and really nothing gets done.
And I have a feeling the Kashmir word might be uttered quite a bit since it wasn't.
But I think Delhi is prepared with an answer for that.
Perhaps. But Shehzad Chaudhry, it almost seems to a lot of people here that Pakistan is looking for India to call off this dialogue so that they don't have to come here either. Because, you know, the sense here is that there's a lot of pressure from the military not to go ahead with this.
I think one of your panelists made an interesting comment when she said that whatever Sartaj Aziz brings will be from the military. And therefore there will be a lot of tu-tu-meh-meh. So what it really means that what you're saying that the politics and the military in Pakistan are not on the same page or do not think alike in terms of India. I think that perhaps gets some sort of contorted in the sense because if Sartaj Aziz is going to speak the language of the army, and let's wait for Sartaj Aziz to do that when he reaches India and is able to talk to the people after the discussions are over, and you'll have a better sense as to whether it was the army that was talking some sense, or is it Mr. Sartaj Aziz and the army together, along with the political government, that have been able to bring about an agenda, or for that matter, a move towards India, or moving on towards India and trying to resolve our difficulties. I think the difficulty with the Indian mindset that I see sitting here is that they're too caught up in whether the military is aligned with the politics or not. I think it's better to deal with what you have, what is presented before you. For the moment, what is being presented before you is that the LOC is active foolishly, I might add, from both sides, without a strategic or a tactical purpose. You have a situation that you can either not talk or talk, and I think the two leaders decided to talk, so good for them and good for the two nations. If we don't want to talk, the point is that perhaps we will go back to where we were about 18 months of your earlier government and some months of this particular government. So I think the choice is basically left to the saner minds sitting in your studios, as well as hopefully some on the Pakistani side, who need to get together and decide as to what is the way of moving forward on both India and Pakistan.
Chaudhry, if, as you say, if the civilian government and the military are speaking in one voice in Pakistan, and you know there are diplomats here who don't believe in that division as well, but if that is the case, then why escalate things after the prime ministers meet, and in a sense so it's very close to sabotaging that dialogue. I mean, right now it's going ahead, but if any big incident happens between now and Sunday, it may not happen. I think we all know that's happened a lot in India-Pakistan ties. So what's the messaging here?
Yeah, the messaging is that within Pakistan, it is the Indian government or the Indian army that is actually violating the LOC or the working boundary, and consistently at that. And you've seen reports on the Pakistani media of people dying, being killed, losing their lives, properties, etc., etc. So that is a reality as well. And you have a similar sort of a perception in India, where you say Pakistan is the one that initiates that. My bigger sense is that there is no strategic or tactical purpose in what either side is doing. Why they are doing that is something that they need to resolve when they get together and talk to each other. Let me also share with you that within Pakistan, there is a huge and a big question as to why Mr. Sartaj Aziz is going at all. If, for example, we decide that these talks must not take place and must not go on, well, you are actually satisfying, or you'll be satisfying a larger constituency in Pakistan as well, because when we say in Pakistan that each talk or any such interaction must be result oriented and must deliver something, the point is that perhaps we are already saying that since it's not going to deliver anything, so might as well just keep off it, stay away from it.
Well,
and how can you talk to someone who doesn't want to talk to you?
Yeah,
so that's the larger issue. That's how
you're mirroring a big constituency. You know, you're right. There are people there who are wondering why Sartaj Aziz is coming here. There are Nalin Kohli, a lot of people here who are wondering why the BJP government, which said talks and terror will not go together, is continuing to pursue this dialogue. We actually haven't even seen a word, not even a tweet from the Prime Minister on Gurdaspur, on Udhampur, and on the civilian killings along the line of control. Whereas he has, you know, wished people happy birthday. He has condemned the blast in Bangkok today. And there is a section that believes that the PM is so determined to have this dialogue on Sunday that he's being very cautious to even condemn the attacks that we've seen. Nalin.
First of all, I think it's a welcome change that this discussion is not rhetoric based on any side. I think everyone who has spoken with a sense of seriousness and looked at whether, you know, there are pros and cons to any aspect of it. And I think that's a welcome thing by itself, whether it's from across the border, whether it's here. So moving now next to the point is about the desire for whether the Prime Minister should tweet on something or not. I think there are many wish lists that come up on a day-to-day. Some of them relate to tweets, some of them relate to whether the Prime Minister should speak on this, some of them relate why does he speak on this. I think so on a daily basis the Prime Minister chooses what he wants to say and he does respond. I think he's always surprised people, those who believe he won't. He has spoken when he has to and he has spoken unequivocally.
Nalin,
the only thing he can't run on a list on when it has to go.
Nalin, he has tweeted this evening on the killings in Bangkok and condemned that. We
Perhaps
had security forces who died in Gurdaspur. We had security forces who died in Udhampur. We had six civilians who died over the weekend along the line of control. So why the silence? Why is the same BJP government that was quick to condemn Pakistan on the issue of terror and say that terror and talks will not go together? Why is the same government now silent on a series of attacks that have taken place, killing both civilians and security forces?
Okay, now having heard you, first of all is just as I don't think the Prime Minister would be looking at a script coming from this program for when he should speak or not. I'm sure you would also likewise with editorial independence not expect any one of us, not certainly the Prime Minister, but any one of us sending you a script of how you should speak and what you should ask. So I think let's respect that. Now let's get back to the question at hand.
You're not answering the
question. You're saying I'm coming to the question. I'm also making a comment.
There is not even.
Sorry,
I'm
also making a comment. No, I'm
there
sorry.
Is not even.
I'm also making a comment, ma'am.
Except for the High Commissioner of Pakistan being summoned yesterday. Nalin, if you want to talk over me, I'll talk over you. The High Commissioner of Pakistan was summoned yesterday, but apart from that, there has been no word from the Ministry of External Affairs on Gurdaspur, on Udhampur, and any of these attacks. Why? Why the silence?
Well, may I also now register a minor protest? I don't recall any of the people being able to finish on this panel their point without being interrupted. I've not even got across my first point. So now ask the question you think which is most relevant, ma'am, and I'll answer that first and then go to the others.
Please answer the question, Nalin.
No, which one? Because there are three different aspects.
I'm asking why the government of India is silent. I'm asking why the government of India is silent on these terror attacks.
Well, I answered you straight on that. I said the government of India will select when it has to. It's not going to take the script from the Congress party or anyone else. The government of India is entitled to.
The Congress party asking the question.
I said or anyone else. I didn't say that you are the Congress party and I didn't allude to it. I merely pointed out that the government of India will not take a script from anyone else. The government of India will speak when it wants to.
Mr. Prakash wants to come in on that.
Nalin, the impression that one gets is that this is a strategic silence because there's a grand game plan in place for the talks and for a relationship with Pakistan. If at all, then the country is not being taken into confidence. So we presume that there is something which is being planned as far as the India-Pakistan issue is concerned, because it really seems like you govern in prose and you in the opposition it's poetry, because there was such a strident anger towards Dr. Manmohan Singh, whereas now it seems that the Prime Minister is walking the same path as Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Well, Smitaji, there are 4 points to counter this. Let's go one by one. First of all is about, alluding anything to it. I won't, because I can't and I don't know. And that will be the honest impression. I can't speak for what is the strategic thinking, and I'm grateful that I can't speak for what is the strategic thinking. Otherwise, it won't be strategic if any one of us had access to that. Second is about the tone of the BJP and the anger, as you put it correctly, against Dr. Manmohan Singh. Perhaps there's also a difference, that you are looking only at what the BJP said, while ignoring the larger context of how the government of India was performing at that time. And it wasn't only related to Pakistan. It was also abdication on a much, much more aspect. The people of India therefore decided that something was wrong and voted like that. It just wasn't only Pakistan. It was failure or abdication of authority in multiple areas, no less from economic decision making to no as important as strategic. Okay, so therefore, that is the larger context. So everything has to be seen in context. When you say about parliament disruption also, we come with the same thing. Everything has a context. It's never identical. If there is an identical situation, that question would be justified.
Okay, let me ask all the other panelists, though. Ambassador Parthasarathy, one last word on how do we ensure that, since you are supporting this dialogue, that it takes place and doesn't break down? You can't guarantee anything, but how does this become a constructive?
I can't guarantee anything. I told you that, look, at the height of Kargil, Sartaj Aziz came to India, we talked, and we gauged then, and pretty well by then, that there were simmering tensions between the military and Nawaz Sharif, and we know what that led to.
Yeah.
I sense there are similar problems today. I'm not suggesting that the end result will be the same. So we have to bear this internal factor in mind. Now, therefore, I come back to the basic thing. What I like about this dialogue is you move it to the military. And I sincerely hope that in this dialogue, I don't care whether the NSAs and all meet later, but there is this institutionalized dialogue. I want to go to one more point. You know, right now, as I said, unexpectedly the infiltration has moved to Jammu. In the Jammu sector, we don't have the military deployed, it's paramilitary. The sort of firepower which I learned from our military boys that is coming across is not paramilitary weapons. The sort of heavy mortars being used, and the sort of multiple launchers being used. So I think that is something which the Defence and Home Ministry should review.
Have to look at, yeah.
Because I believe that if this sort of thing continues, the response should be more than proportionate, even while the DGMOs meet.
Well, Smita, how do you think, how do you avoid a breakdown? Are you convinced that there's going to be a lot of rhetoric?
How do you deal with Pakistan? How do you prevent a breakdown? Even the Americans haven't found a way, right? They haven't found an answer. The only answer they have is throw more planes, throw more money at it, Pakistan, and hope that they sort their issues out and they behave responsibly. They stop promoting terror within and outside the country. That is what America's way of dealing with Pakistan has been. As far as India is concerned, I don't think we have a Pakistan policy. It's knee-jerk. We react to what happens in Jammu and Kashmir. We react to how Pakistan behaves on the border. We react to Pakistan's internal issues. And this thing about Sartaj Aziz, which Ambassador Parthasarathy said when Sartaj Aziz came during Kargil. Remember, he came and he talked even during Kargil. But at the end of it, he says that Pakistan has achieved its objectives during the Kargil war. So that was his takeaway at the end of it. So while this whole thing of talking...
What he says with us in public is very different from what he says in private.
You are privy to what happened in private, but what we know
But it was clear to us which way we were headed.
So you know what happened in private, but in public that's what we gauge. Now as far as the talks are concerned, yes, of course talks should happen. Responsible countries don't say we are not talking to you, Katti, and go away. That's not how responsible countries behave. Democracies ought to, even if they are flawed democracies, ought to talk with each other. And certainly it's very good that it's moved to a security situation where the NSAs are talking. Whether it achieves something immediately is something...
You're basically concerned about the atmosphere in which this is happening more than anything else at the end of the day. Shahzad Chaudhary, I'll give you the last word. From the Pakistani perspective, how do we avoid this blowing up in both our faces on this weekend?
Yeah, one thing, we need to grow beyond 1999. We remember we are in 2015. The ground situations have changed, both countries have moved on, and therefore first thing is let's live in 2015 and beyond and hope to move forward beyond 2015. I was an ambassador in 2006 till 2009. And if I want to end my world at 2009, unfortunately, that's not going to help anyone. Secondly, even if you want to resolve terror, and terror is what bothers you hell of a lot, and I can understand why. And terror bothers Pakistan hell of a lot because of Balochistan and the FATA region. I think you still need to, whatever you need to resolve, even if it is terror, you need to talk. Because without talking, you cannot resolve anything. So that's the second thing that we need to look at. Thirdly, my humble submission to all of us here is that if you want to wallow in the past, then unfortunately there's a litany of complaints from both sides and a lot of dirt that is passed on between both sides. You guys want to move on? You want to move on and look at better things, look at better potential, look at more cooperative arrangements, look at how the two nations can work together on so many things that actually threaten both our societies more than our states. I think that is where the future lies, and perhaps we'll one day be mature enough and strong enough and secure enough more difficult.
I would just like to tell the Air Marshal that those who forget the past are fated to relive it.
Okay, I just feel that if Pakistan was to look at the prototype of the UAE terror document, you know, India-UAE, if they really want to do something about battling terror within the country and improving relations with India vis-a-vis the terror situation, I think if that prototype can be replicated with Pakistan,
we agree with that.
It would be fabulous.
Absolutely, we agree with that.
All right.
That will be the day.
All right. Well, on that note,
you won't let that happen, but we will keep working at it.
All right. On that note, I have to leave it at that tonight. Thank you very much, Shehzad Chaudhary, Nalin Kohli, Smita Prakash and G. Parthasarathy for joining us tonight, and we are expecting this to be a very interesting week in the run-up to those talks as well. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll be going live again to Dubai, where the Indian community is already singing and dancing as it awaits the Prime Minister, who will be coming to speak there shortly. That's after the break.